Alright, so at this point, you should have a lump of clay that looks something like your monster. So this is something like my monster. Can you guys see that? I don't know if you guys can see that. This is kind of a funny angle. Okay? So what I'm trying to do right now is this is just, remember how I said this was just going to be a crude shape? Now notice that from the front view, it doesn't look like my front view. Can you see the front view back there? He looks way chubbier in the front view. Do you guys see any other differences between my picture, my sculpture, and my draft? Does anybody see any differences?
The head's a little thicker.
The tail.
The head needs to go up a little bit higher.
The tail's not bent in a different direction.
Yeah. So I did decide when I was making it to bend it in a different direction. So I did that on purpose. So the biggest things is I need a wider belly, a chubbier belly here, and the head needs to come up higher. Okay, so the next step to what we're doing, before we can do anything else, is we need to make this form into the shape we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to score on just, this clay has to come straight out of the brick of clay from over there. If it's clay that you've ripped apart into small pieces and put back into a ball, what do you have to do before you use it? Wedge it. But this is a fresh lump of clay, so I'm just going to go ahead and use it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to score on a chubby belly. Okay? Now I can do this two ways. If I don't want it very chubby, let's say I'm just going to add a little bit of chub, but it's not going to add too much bulk. It's not going to make my walls way thicker than they currently are. Then what I can do is I can just score on some clay. And honestly, it doesn't have to look like a belly. This just looks like a lump of clay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to score everywhere that I'm going to squish this clay. And I usually like to squish it pretty wide. And I'm going to go ahead and slip and score on that belly. And I'm going to squish it how I want it. I'm going to look at it from different angles. Make sure that it's as wide and belly-ish as I want. Okay? So that is the first way. This would be a good option if you're not adding on too much thickness. What's the thickest your clay is allowed to be? Your thumb finger. Okay? So this is pushing it. I'm not going to lie. This is pushing it. If your walls are already really heavy and really thick, then this could be an issue. And right now it looks more like a mosquito bite than a belly. So I'm going to squish it out this direction. Make it look a little bit more harmonious with the shape that I've got going. And then once I've got it on there, I can just use my red rubber rib. I don't have one over here for me, so I'm using my orange one. And I can fix it. So now you can tell, especially from the top view, I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's much wider on that side. It looks more belly-like on that side. Okay, you can also tell from the front view that it's starting to come up. The other thing that I could do, as long as my clay is still on the wet side, you don't want to ruin your piece, is I could pinch this to make the head a little bit smaller, which will make that look a little bit better. Does that make sense? As long as it's still wet enough, you can pinch and squish. The other way that you could do this, the other option is if you have large areas. How many of you guys have big thigh muscles or like haunches on the bottom? That I would do as a, just to lighten your piece. Is going to make your piece a lot easier to balance as well. Make just a really narrow pinch pot. See how I'm just digging like a little bowl there? And let's say I'm going to add that right here. I'm going to go ahead and cut out where I'm going to put that. You should mark it. I just guessed it. Because see how thick my walls already are? They're pretty thick. I don't know if you guys can tell in there.
Yeah, pretty thick.
But they're pretty stinking thick. So I'm going to score and score on this bowl. And that is the second way to alter this shape.
So what would I do for my tails?
Say that again?
What would I do for my tails?
So at this point, we're not doing any structural body parts. We're still just getting this basic shape into the shape we want it. We're starting to make it look less rough and more specific to our draft shape. Does that make sense to everybody?
So does that mean I can add this now?
I mean, technically, yes. So as I push and slip and score on this clay, I just need to make sure that anywhere that I squish this clay, what do I have to do underneath there?
Score.
Score. So right now, before I squish out this clay, I'm gonna score, it has slip on it already squishing out, so I'm not worried about more slip. But I definitely need to score or else it's gonna pop off eventually. Okay, so does everybody understand that all we're doing now is we're taking this crude shape that we made, that is just very basic, and we're chubbing up the areas that need to be chubbed up, we're pinching the areas that maybe need to be thinned, or carving off even into the shape that looks more like our draft. Yes, Josh?
What happens if like in like one more class period your piece is ready to be filed?
That is not going to happen because these are going to be very complex parts. You guys are all going to have to carve onto these multiple textures. It's not just about building the shape. These are going to be really nice sculptures. Everybody feeling me on that? This is not going to be a fast, we are not even halfway done with these. Most of the work is going to come after we have the right shape. Does that make sense, everybody? Like you need to settle in. This is a big old sculpture we're doing. Okay, so now I have a chubbier body. Everybody see that from the front view? So that's the first thing. You can chub things up, make it look harmonious though, and smooth it back out. Now the other place that I needed some extra height, and I am gonna do this because mine is already so heavy and most of my weight is wanting to fall down, right? And I don't want to put too much more weight on this big area that's already defying gravity right here. Does that make sense? So I am gonna cut most of that off. I'm gonna lighten it up. So that's gonna make that, I mean, that's just that much clay that I just took off of there. I'm going to make a pinch pot, just a really small one. Just squishing some clay into the shape that I want. And the nice thing is when you do this, it's very, very wet. So does that look good? It looks like he has a hat on his head right now. Does that look good right now?
No, you have to squish it.
No, but I'm gonna score it on as is. And once I get it on there, I'm gonna form it and make it look really nice. But I have to remember that this is fresh wet clay and it's gonna collapse if I put too much pressure on it. Okay? So I'm gonna go ahead, add some slip here. You guys will have more time than I have right now. I always extra score, and I'm just gonna go ahead and add what looks like a hat here, okay? But I wanna make this head look like it's smoothed into the back, right? And I wanna make it look like it's part of the head and not on top of the head. So I have to, when I squish it and put it together. Now the nice thing is that this is wet on leather hard. Does that make sense? So I don't have to do a Band-Aid. The pinch pot is the Band-Aid. Everybody feeling me on that? I'm not putting, when we did our bodies, we were putting two leather hard-ish pieces together. That's why we needed the Band-Aid. We couldn't squish them into each other. But when you're working on something that is, and that looks a little bit ridiculous.
It looks like a dinosaur.
It looks, yeah, I was just about to say that. So I can paddle it into the shape that I want, and that can really help me out. Actually, that really did help a lot. See how that's now starting to look like it's part of that same head shape.
It looks like a dinosaur.
It does still look like a dinosaur. Now just a different dinosaur. Okay, so let's say that that is what I want, but now it's maybe, I think that I like the height here, but this is looking a little bit too thick down here. I can literally just go in at it and take parts off. And my clay is so thick right there that it's not even harming it at all. Okay? So when you're gonna do this though, I'm just reshaping the clay into what I want by adding and carving. But if you look right here, everybody look, can everybody see I just took like a huge chunk out. And yes, it looks better, I think. See how much better it looks with that chin? I just have to make sure that the clay isn't too thin right there. And it's not. If it is a little bit on the thin side, you can just take a thick little chub of clay and squirt in there. Make sure that it's nice and, where did I do with the clay? Okay, it's right there. Make sure that it's nice and secure, okay? So just be aware that if you start cutting into things and altering things, you just have to make sure that it's nice and stable. Like one thing that's happening right now is I'm starting to get, can you guys see that crack right there? So that's okay, clay cracks, that's what it do. I'm just gonna make sure that I wipe it away, secure it, and now this side looks ridiculous because I made the other side look better. So I'm just gonna carve into it and make it into the actual shape that I'm looking for. I need some more little wet clay there. I'm gonna score it and slip it and make it into the shape that I want. Did you have a question?
What if your clay isn't quite leather hard yet?
It shouldn't be, hopefully.
Oh.
If my clay was too wet the hard the other day, remember that? And so the only reason I'm able to do this right now is because I really let it set up. That's why I was a little bit behind you guys, because I had to let my clay get wet again. But if your clay is on the leather hard side, it's like cutting into a rock. It's not gonna be super moldable. You really wanna do this. If it starts to collapse in your hands, then guess what? It's too wet. But if your piece is still pretty moldable, you're gonna be good to go, okay? So now I've got, let's pretend that I've done a great job. I still have flaws here. The last thing that I wanna show you guys how to do today, as we're getting this body shape correct, we're altering things, we're adding, we're taking away, we're finessing it. Right now, does it look like my piece?
Kind of.
What's the biggest thing about it right now that looks a little bit awkward? Is it sitting on its legs?
No, there's no legs.
I have no legs. So what I need to do right now is I want to get my body in position. I cannot add legs yet. Why do you think we're adding bulk to our piece before we add the legs? Why do you guys think that is, Nick?
If you add the legs and then try and add bulk, it's gonna be uneven and the legs might be unstable.
Right, I need to add all my weight before I can balance. The legs are literally what are doing the balancing. Does that make sense to everybody? So if I add a bunch of extra weight on the head, then the legs, I might have to remake all the legs because now it's not unbalanced again. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to take a big, it doesn't have to be a good piece of clay. Like you don't have to wedge it or anything. We're just going to use chunks of clay here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it to sit in the position that I want it to sit in. Okay? So I'm just taking a big lump of clay. Just be careful that you're not altering your shape when you do this. And I'm going to put the pressure down on this lump of clay and I'm going to try to get it to sit in the position that I want it. Does that look good? That looks pretty close, right?
Good enough.
Okay, so once I get it there, then it's gonna hold itself up. I probably need to put a little bit behind the tail. I'm a little bit afraid. So you can put like little bolts of clay, like little balls of clay in different places. Like if I think it's gonna fall right here, that's not quite enough. I make a ball that's slightly shorter and then I just squish it up until it rocks into it and holds it secure. Okay, I do the same thing for underneath the tail. I have to make it flatter than the tail, so I get it underneath there. Everybody see that? And then I'm gonna pinch it so that it holds it in place really good. Okay, so now I can kind of test it, make sure that it's gonna hold its shape. I can look at it from the different directions. This side, I don't know if you guys can tell, but it definitely had the most secureness. If I want to add a little bit, I could reshift it. But now my piece is going to be sitting, and now I can really start to look at it and make alterations on it in the correct posture. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so our job right now, we're not adding on details yet. We're not carving in details yet. All we're doing is trying to get an accurate form, body form. Everybody following me? All right, any questions? All right, and also if you can, make it look clean. Mine is messy. So like right now I'm gonna spend a little bit of time smoothing it. Because as we let these set up at night, the more dry they get, the more permanent it gets. Everybody following me? So each day, like the last 10 minutes I would take to like clean up what you got. Everybody get back to work. We have 20 minutes till we gotta start cleaning these up. Yes. Yes, great question. So So what you're gonna do, like, let's say that this is a pinch pot.
Mine also has like loads of
What do you need to, oh, okay. Okay. So let's say, come over here. I think I recorded that. So you can watch that. I'll put that on the video. Alright, go sit down. What does everybody here want? Talk about your piece? Okay. Everybody who has a question, go have a seat for 1 second. I'm going to start a video. You guys, those of you that were absent last class, I'm gonna play the demo from last class, and then I'll come around to you.